The snow fell hard that night, so heavy it swallowed the town whole. The streets disappeared beneath a white sea, and the only sound left was the whisper of the wind, like ghosts drifting through forgotten alleys. Streetlights glowed faintly through the storm, halos in the darkness, lonely and flickering. Cars sat abandoned, buried to their mirrors, and the world seemed frozen in time. At the far edge of town, behind a crooked old fence, stood a weathered wooden house. From its chimney rose a thin ribbon of smoke, curling up into the storm. Inside, an elderly woman named Margaret sat by the crackling fire. Her grey hair was neatly pinned, her frail hands moving steadily as she knitted a scarf. The warmth of the flames kissed her face, but her eyes, soft and tired, held a quiet sadness. She'd lived through many winters in that house, but this one felt colder, emptier. Her husband had been gone for years, and her children, busy with their own lives in faraway cities, rarely called. The silence had become a kind of companion, one that grew heavier with every snowfall. As the blizzard howled louder, shaking the window panes, Margaret closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Lord, please, keep everyone out there safe tonight. Let them find warmth. She never imagined how quickly that prayer would return to her doorstep, or how it would change her life forever. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and tell us in the comments, what does kindness mean to you? And don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Corner, where true stories warm the heart. Then it happened. A thunderous knock shattered the silence, so hard the door shook on its hinges. Margaret froze, the yarn slipping from her lap. Visitors in the middle of a snowstorm at this hour? Impossible! Her heart pounded as she clutched her shawl and shuffled toward the door. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. 15 men stood before her, shoulders broad, faces fierce and red from the cold. Their leather jackets bore patches that read a name she'd only heard in fearful whispers, Hell's Angels. Snow clung to their beards, their boots sank deep into the drifts, and behind them a row of motorcycles gleamed faintly under layers of frost. For a moment, Margaret's knees nearly gave way. These were men people warned you about. Rebels, troublemakers, the kind that made small towns nervous. But then she noticed something beneath the tattoos, the rough leather, and the frost-bitten faces. They were shivering. Their lips were blue, their hands trembling, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. Whatever reputation they carried, whatever stories the world told about them, tonight they were just human beings, caught in a storm that could kill. Without a second's hesitation, Margaret stepped aside. Her voice was calm but firm. Come in before you freeze to death. The men looked at each other, stunned. No one had ever opened a door for them like that. Most people crossed the street to avoid their shadow. Yet here was this tiny, silver-haired woman, barely 5 feet tall, holding open her warm home as if they were expected guests. One by one, the bikers stepped inside, snow dripping from their boots, steam rising off their jackets as the heat hit them. The little wooden house seemed to expand to make room for them, the air thick with the scent of leather, smoke, and melting frost. Margaret didn't waste a moment. She bustled to the kitchen, pulling out bread, canned soup, and leftover stew from her dinner. It wasn't much, but she served it like a feast, smiling, fussing over each man as if she'd done this 100 times before. The bikers sat awkwardly, massive bodies squeezed onto floral couches and creaking wooden chairs. They didn't quite know where to put their hands or their gratitude. They weren't used to kindness, not the real kind, the kind that expects nothing in return. Outside, the storm raged harder, clawing at the windows like a desperate animal. Inside, a strange warmth filled the space, part firelight, part grace. Slowly, the men began to talk. They told Margaret they'd been riding cross-country, caught mid-route when the blizzard swept in. The highways had shut down, motels were packed, and the cold had bitten deep. Their bikes, once their pride, now sat half buried in ice outside. Margaret listened quietly, her gentle eyes never leaving them. She refilled their coffee, draped blankets across broad shoulders, and nodded as if she'd known their kind of struggle too. One by one, the bikers fell asleep, wrapped in quilts that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Their snores rumbled through the house, soft and steady, like thunder fading into distance. Margaret stayed awake, gazing at the sleeping men. There was a softness in her chest she hadn't felt in years, a strange, tender ache. She'd never had sons, but that night she felt as if life had sent her 15. By dawn, the storm had quieted. Outside, the world shimmered, snow glittering like 1,000 diamonds under a pale golden sky. The air was still, peaceful. Inside, one by one, the bikers began to stir. The bikers stirred slowly, stretching stiff arms and rubbing the sleep from their eyes. Their deep voices rumbled through the little kitchen as they thanked Margaret again and again, each in their own gruff way. She had already made them breakfast, scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and steaming coffee. It wasn't fancy, but to them, it tasted like heaven after the night they'd had. When they stepped outside, the cold morning light hit their faces. Their motorcycles were half buried under snow, but still standing strong, chrome glinting beneath the frost. They worked together to brush them off, breath puffing in clouds, laughter cutting through the chill. Before they mounted their bikes, the leader, a tall man with steel-gray eyes and a voice like gravel, turned to her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we won't forget this." "Not ever." Margaret smiled, her hand resting gently on his arm. "Just promise me you'll ride safe," she said. He nodded, and moments later, 15 engines roared to life. The sound shook the air, echoing through the empty streets as they rode away, disappearing into the endless white. The silence that followed felt almost sacred. Margaret stood in her doorway long after they were gone, watching the horizon. She thought that was the end of it. A strange, beautiful memory of one winter night, when her little home became a refuge for men the world called dangerous. But kindness doesn't fade. It lingers, it travels, and sometimes it comes back when you least expect it. The next morning, Margaret was outside sprinkling birdseed across the snow when she heard it, a low, distant rumble. At first, she thought it was thunder rolling over the hills, but it grew louder, closer. The ground began to tremble beneath her boots. Margaret froze, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. Down the long road that led to her house, she saw them, motorcycles. Not 15 this time, but hundreds, row after row, stretching so far she could barely see where they ended. The engines roared in unison, the sound like a storm returning to her doorstep. One by one, the riders stopped, parking on both sides of the road until her little house was surrounded. Leather jackets gleamed, snow swirled in the exhaust, and the quiet neighborhood watched in stunned silence from behind curtained windows. Margaret stood still, breath caught in her throat, eyes wet with tears. Then, from the front of the line, the same tall man stepped off his bike. His boots crunched through the snow as he approached her, holding something in his gloved hand. When he smiled, it wasn't the smirk of a rebel. It was something softer, grateful, human. He handed her a bouquet of fresh flowers, roses, bright and impossibly alive in the dead of winter. "We told the brothers what you did for us," he said. "Word spread fast. You opened your home when no one else would. We don't forget things like that." And that's when Margaret saw it, from the backs of their bikes. The riders began unloading one surprise after another, bags of groceries, bundles of firewood, boxes packed with blankets, sweaters and warm socks. Some carried hammers and nails, others snow shovels and tools. Without waiting for a word, they set to work. They cleared her driveway, patched her broken fence, oiled the squeaky hinge on her porch door. The quiet little house that had once echoed with loneliness now overflowed with life, boots crunching on snow, laughter spilling through the air, the low growl of engines mixing with the sound of friendship. Margaret stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her heart, tears welling behind her glasses. She hadn't felt this alive in years. That day she learned something she would never forget. Kindness always comes back. What she had given freely, without asking for anything in return, had multiplied 100-fold. In a world that could feel so cold, she had discovered that even the roughest exteriors could hide hearts capable of deep gratitude. These men, bikers the world feared and judged, showed a different side that few would ever see. A brotherhood built on loyalty, respect, and a promise kept. As the sun began to dip behind the snowy hills, the men gathered once more at the end of her yard. Then, in one powerful moment, their engines roared together, a thunderous salute to the woman who had opened her door when no one else would. Margaret stood on her porch, shawl wrapped tight, tears streaming freely now as she waved. The roar of their bikes echoed down the valley long after they vanished into the gold-tinted snow. But her heart was no longer lonely, her house no longer silent. She knew that somewhere out there, she now had family on two wheels, bound not by blood, but by kindness. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that compassion still exists, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so we can keep sharing stories that prove kindness can truly change the world. Before we go, I want to ask you, would you have opened that door that night? Tell us in the comments below. Let's talk about the courage it takes to choose love when the world teaches fear. Because Margaret's story isn't just about one snowy night. It's about a truth that never melts away. Kindness is never wasted. It plants seeds that bloom in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, all it takes is a warm fire, a simple meal, and an open door in a storm to change not just 15 lives, but hundreds more. And later that night, as Margaret sat once again by her fire, she smiled softly, knowing in her heart that she would never truly be alone again.